Hi, it's Liz from Heal at Home Pet Care, and we are doing a live chat. It is Wednesday, July 10th. And let's see, today I was going to talk about, I have a question that came in after the last chat. And I was going to also talk about what I've been seeing lately in the patients that I see. And here in New Jersey, it's pretty hot and muggy. And nobody's liking the heat right now. The mugginess is really causing a problem with a lot of pets, especially if your pet has a heart condition or a kidney issue or some kind of asthma or breathing problem. So keep your pets indoors during the heat of the day. So if you get them out for a walk before, let's say 10 or even 9 o'clock in the morning, and then later at night after the sun starts going down after 8 o'clock. And just remember too, your pet's age. A lot of the patients that I see are doing really well with their chronic diseases. They're managing them really, really well, but they're 12 years old, 14 years old, 15 years old, and that translates into like an 80-year-old or a 90-year-old or even up to a 100-year-old. So give them a little break. You know, they're not going to be as frisky playing around. They're going to want to lie around. Even if they're in an air conditioner all day, they can still feel that heat. Okay, so on to the first question, and this is about a kitty who that was hospitalized several times for terrible constipation. They're on a special diet now called Fiber Response, and they are right now living with someone else, so their anxiety level is really high, and they have a lot of stress. It's a one-bedroom apartment, and they're just not getting enough exercise either. So obviously the recommendation is to get them more exercise and more one-on-one time with the person that they are most bonded with, if that's possible. There are calming aids that you can try in the PetWise membership. There's a section on, and actually I just did a blog post on fear, lightning phobia, and noise phobia. And firework phobia for the 4th of July. So if you use any of those calming aids listed in there, for cats, Feel Away. It's also under a name called Comfort Zone. There's a spray, there's a plug-in that you can use. I would recommend using the plug-in if it's a one-bedroom apartment, and you'll get some more effect from that because it'll always be in the air. You can also get a collar to put on the cat of that hormone, and they also make calming treats. So you might have to try a few different ones for the cat, but they can work pretty well, or even CBD oil. I can't tell you, every day many people mention CBD oil. Have I heard about it? Of course I've heard about it. So has everybody. And which one to recommend, and different people are using different ones and seeing varying results. But it can work. So those would be my first recommendations, is get the cat something that's very calming. Don't make too many other changes, like changes to diet. If they're not liking the Fiber Response diet, just skip that for now. Cats get really, really stressed out with the change in diet. And there actually was a study done that cats that have changes in diet, changes in environment, are really prone to stress, and they get bladder issues. So cats are really sensitive beings. They don't like change. And as far as getting them more exercise, if there's a hallway in the apartment building, you can start to use some playtime for that. Some cats just don't like playing, but I would start using some playtime. Get a feather on a string. Even cats like rolled up tinfoil. That's something that's really easy to do, and you can just roll up some tinfoil and throw it around and get them interested that way. Crumpling up paper. There's a video I have on making an indoor kitty playground in a big, huge box where you get your deliveries in. You can use something like that and just put a plant in it. You can put some catnip. You can get some cat grass. You can put some toys in there, get the rolled up tinfoil, put it in there so they can bat it around. But you really have to work at what's going to work for them. And I think the first thing is improving their mood. Then that will translate to them not being as constipated. Their digestion is going to be better. They're not going to be as stressed out. If it's an older kitty, sometimes they do have some physical changes which causes that. So adding fiber to the diet. If they're not liking the food that's fiber, you can add something like Miralax. But I like using something natural first. So something with slippery elm in it, slippery elm bark, or marshmallow root. Those things work really, really well on kitties, and you can try that. So I hope that works. Let me know how it's going, and I hope the kitty does better soon. What else is going on? Today I made some mint. I just wanted to show this to you. I have a lot of mint in my garden now. So this is just a glass bottle. I have some natural spring water in it. And I like to use natural spring water because fluoride that's in the water system can be really disruptive to the endocrine system, especially the thyroid. And a lot of pets, especially cats, are either hyperthyroid for cats usually, or hypothyroid for dogs. So fluoride can be a big disruptor of that. So using spring water is great. And I just put a bunch of mint in this bottle, and I had this in the fridge, so it's, you know, you can feel it's cold, or I can feel that it's cold. And this will be ready to drink later on tonight or tomorrow. And I'll keep this in the fridge. I'll keep making one pretty much every day because my mint is going crazy right now. And mint likes a good haircut, so I'll keep cutting it. And the other thing I did with it is I made some tea and just put some honey in it. So I had a big mint day. And actually right now I'm not very hungry. My stomach is feeling pretty full. It's a good thing if you have a pet who is on a diet or has any digestive issues, you can try mint with them. So for that kitty, you could try mint. I don't find like cats love mint, but you can try dried mint or even giving them fresh mint, just seeing if they just like chewing on the leaves, and maybe they'll self-medicate that way. An herb that I did want to talk about today is St. Johnswort. So this is a plant. I do have a video in the membership site. I make my own oil with St. Johnswort, and it's a yellow flower. It's a little yellow flower. It's considered an invasive weed actually in this part of the country, and it's not super invasive. Where I see it, it's not like a huge amount. When I collect it, there might be a little stand of it, and then you walk a little further, there's a little stand, and you really have to kind of look for it. But it's pretty, and it has a little yellow flower, and the Latin name is Hypericum perforatum. And the perforatum is because in the leaves it looks like little perforations. So if you hold it up to the sun, you'll see little dots, almost like perforations in the leaf, in their tiny leaf. And those are actually oil glands. So that's where the medicine comes from in St. Johnswort. And what you do is you just cut off the tops, the flowering tops, and maybe a little bit more of the green. And you put them in a jar, and you can either make an oil from them. So you can do olive oil, sesame oil, any kind of oil that you like, and fill it to the top, or you can make a tincture with vodka. So you would fill up a jar with the plant material, and it has to be fresh. You can't use dried. And then what happens is when it's ready, it turns this red color. So this one's ready to go. This is an oil that I made, and this was like a fresh picking of it. I actually picked it and had the oil right there with it. So you can see the oils and the tannins that came out of that. So that's a really good medicine. And it does have a smell to it, but I use olive oil, so I'm also smelling the olive oil in this. So what can you use this for? The oil is really great to use for any kind of burn. So if there's a burn or a wound, an open wound that's kind of like looks like a hot burning kind of wound, you can use it on that. So it's really great for end-of-life care too, with ulcerations and things, because it's antiviral and it's antibacterial, and it's soothing. So it's really good for wound healing. I had a sunburn this week, so I've been putting it on there, and one day I skipped it, and I could feel the heat and the burning, and every time I put this on, I felt fine. And then it's also good as a sunscreen, but only if you make it from the fresh plant. If you're using St. Johnswort, you'll see warnings on the internet. And if you're using the dried plant material, that's when you start to have a problem. Your body becomes very sensitive to the sun. They have warnings that if you're on antidepressants, not to use the dried herb. And they basically just say don't use St. Johnswort. But really, the research is showing now that it's just the dried herb that you can't use. So the fresh plant material is fine to use. If you make a tincture of it, or you buy a tincture, it should be fresh plant material. If it's not this red color for either one, don't use it. It has no medicine in it. The tincture can be used internally, so you put a few drops into your pet's water or into their food. Don't put it straight into their mouth because any tincture, it has alcohol and it doesn't taste good to them. But you can put it in their food or water, and that's a good antiviral. So they have a lot of studies now with St. Johnswort being good to help against AIDS. So we know that our feline friends also have a version of AIDS. It's feline AIDS, and St. Johnswort might be a really good ally to either keep it at bay, maybe not cure it, but maybe cure it. It's antiviral, so it's really good against Lyme disease, especially in the beginning stages. The oil is good as an insect repellent also. Not as strong as yarrow, but it does work. It's also it's good for nerve damage. So if you have a pet who has a lot of nerve damage or even achy joints, if there's like a tightness in your pet and they have like really, if let's say they have some arthritis and they're really using their upper back, it really gets the knots out. So if you're massaging your pet and it seems really achy in their neck or joints, put a little St. Johnswort, and a few minutes later you massage it and it should feel really relaxed. So St. Johnswort right now is my go-to this summer. And I hope to find another patch of it and make some more for next year. I have a pretty good supply of it now. I just gave a little to my friend. She's a massage therapist, so she's going to try it on some of her patients and see how it works. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, we've got a little hunter over there. So my little kitty, that you might know him by now. You can see his physique doesn't look like a hunter, but he's been hunting and he's turned out to be a really good hunter. Unfortunately, we don't like to see it, but he has been catching mice that have made their way inside into the basement, into his living area. He just saw a chipmunk run by. He actually caught a bird somehow out here on this deck the other day, and he really can't jump. So he caught a bird and brought it in the house, and we got it outside safely, but I'll keep him so you can see what he's up to. I wanted to talk a little bit about pharmaceuticals and things that you should know about drug companies and drugs that you might be using for your pets. Because there was a book that just came out called Bottle of Lies, and it's about the pharmaceutical industry. And if you want to just read a little bit about it, there was a review in the New York Times this weekend in the book review. But this book went into some detail about the drug companies and the greed of this industry since its inception, and how they are not looking out for our best interests. So the industry is really set up to make money and profit. And when a drug first comes out, at least in the United States, it is very well researched and documented, and there are a lot of studies that these companies have to go through, so they spend a lot of money putting out a new drug. So the first company that comes out with a drug, they've put a lot of time and effort and studies into it. So usually those drugs are safe in that way, but they're still new. And you'll see a drug that comes out and maybe 10 years later, 5 years later, 20 years later, you start to see that there are issues with these drugs. There are heart medications now that they're saying causes really foggy brain Alzheimer's like symptoms. And these are drugs that are very, very popular to try to prevent certain heart issues. And they may not be necessary, but they're given out like candy because they're pushed by the drug company. And they are probably good in certain circumstances, but probably not for everyone, and yet they're being given to everyone. So that's one example of some kind of drug that may not be great. Did you find something? No. After that, a drug company will have a patent on their drug. And until that patent is expired, they're the only ones who can make it. So once the patent is expired, then generic drug companies can come in and start making that same drug. And what happens at that point is they are able to bypass a lot of the studies and the testing that the first company went through because it's already been done. And what they do is they may not have the same exact ingredients or the same quality ingredients, and they may not manufacture the drug in the same way, and yet they're allowed to bypass a lot of these regulations. So a generic drug may not be as good as the original drug unless it has an authorization from the original drug company saying we certify that this is a similar product. So you have to do your research. And there was, let's see, the Cleveland Clinic is a place that has a blacklist of drugs, of generic drugs that are drugs that they would not recommend using because they really haven't been studied or testing, or the quality is not good. So if you want to go on Google the Cleveland Clinic and the black list of generic drugs, and typically these are cardiac drugs and antidepressants, and those are two categories of drugs that not only are used a lot for humans, but are used a lot for our pets. I'm seeing them used more and more just very freely. And doctors, they trust what the drug companies are telling them because they don't have time to be studying all of these things, but they're getting very aware. They're becoming very aware, at least human doctors, becoming very, very aware of these issues with drugs. And a lot of them won't use them anymore. So, or they won't dispense them to their patients, or they're only dispense a certain brand that they know is a good quality and they know works. They also had mentioned that there's like an A/B grading of drugs that you might see, and that basically means nothing. Anything that's A or B is okay quality. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't have anything to do with quality, so don't be fooled by something like that. And then there is a huge difference in drugs that are made within the United States and outside of the United States. So in the United States, that is one of the most highly regulated industries. So things like, unfortunately, herbals, generic brands that might come from other countries are not very well regulated. And you have to really question the quality. And the author of this book actually went to, one of the places she went to is India, and saw firsthand at how some of these inspections are done. And in some cases, it was just a flat out lie. They'd bring the inspector, well, the inspector would tell them that they're coming ahead of time, so they'd set everything up, and they would then have like a fake lab and a fake place that they would do the inspection in. And they would pass the inspection, and then the real facility was just filthy and not done right, and that they would look back in the dumpster and the things that it was just a mess. So you really have to be careful of these outside countries making drugs, and you have to do your research. So you can actually go on, if you Google a drug, you can actually Google FDA warning and then put the drug name in, and you can find out more about these drugs and how they may or may not be quality-wise for your pets. The other thing I've seen is when drugs are compounded, a lot of pet drugs become compounded and that means that they're changed into a different form. So you might have a pill of a certain drug, and if you have a cat that doesn't eat very well or won't take a pill, it might get compounded into a liquid or into a topical that you can put in their ear and it gets absorbed in, or you can give it rectally. Or it can be put in a paste or a gel that they can lick off of their finger, and you can put a few different drugs. Sometimes you can put a few different drugs together and then put it in a gel and then put it in. But I've seen different quality of compounding. There are some really good quality compounding pharmacies. There's one in Manhattan, there's one out in Arizona. And they do a good job. And if you call them, you can actually find out ahead of time if a drug is able to be compounded and in what way it can be compounded into. And a lot of them deliver overnight. But you're changing the drug. So anytime you change the original drug from a pill into something else, you're changing it. So if it works for your pet, great. I've seen certain steroids being given to cats and topically because they won't take it orally. And a lot of cats I've seen do fine with that for a year or two and no problems at all. And I've seen other cats where their ears actually start curling up from the steroid and they start drying out and curling up. So you really have to be careful with some of these. But if it works for your pet, great. If your pet is given a drug and it's not working, but it's a drug known to work for that condition, then either the dosage might be off or that brand of medicine. If it's generic, you might want to try the brand name or try a different brand. So a lot of doctors will just change the type of drug, but it might not be an issue of the type of drug. It might just be an issue of the quality and the brand of the drug. So just be aware of all this. I know it's very confusing and it seems very daunting. You're already dealing with a pet who's not feeling well and that you have to give medicine to. But unfortunately, that's what's going on now with all of these drugs around. And there are a lot of drugs being made today, and there's a lot of drugs that are out there. So it really does pay to do your homework with that. And that's where herbals come into play with pets. I find like they respond really well to them. And they can take a lot longer to work depending on the herbal that you use. Something like St. Johnswort, an oil, you should see a difference pretty quickly. Actually almost as quickly as an antibiotic in some cases. And actually recommended for antibiotics now, the recommendation is for people to stop taking it as soon as you see the symptoms stop. So for pets, it should be the same thing. As soon as you see the symptoms clear up, you should stop the antibiotic. They don't recommend giving it for that long 2-week course anymore. There are certain cases, maybe with a bladder infection that's been really like reoccurring or doesn't go away. Then I would recommend taking the full course a little bit beyond, and what the veterinarian recommends, because those can be really tough to get rid of. But in most cases now, the recommendation is just to not go for the full course and just stop when you find like your symptoms are gone. But for herbals, they may take a little longer to work, and you may have to take more. I think we see a bird. Where did we see? You gonna get the bird? So what I see usually is herbals take a little bit longer. It depends. Like if you're trying to use an herbal to get rid of allergies, that could take up to a year of giving something internally to really change the body. But if you're looking for something like slippery elm, you should start seeing effects pretty quickly with that. As far as healing something, a lot of drugs aren't meant to heal. They're meant to help with symptoms. And a lot of them suppress the body's own immune system so that they're not going to heal on these drugs. So a lot of times, you can start with a drug for an acute issue and then find out from your doctor how to wean your pet off that drug in case you want to. Then you can find an herbal. You have some time. It buys you some time to find an herbal to start introducing. And then sometimes you can start weaning the drug. I'd say it's really hard working with a veterinarian sometimes because it's a whole different type of medicine that they usually are not trained in. I think today you can find someone, you might have to do a phone consult with someone if your veterinarian is not completely well-versed, or if they don't really have the time to research it for you. But a lot of times you can start to wean your pet off a medication if you start them on an herbal, and they can do really well. And then long-term, the herbal supporting them in the same way that the drug was, but it's also adding some healing qualities. So with St. Johnswort, it's really good for inflammation, burning, any kind of burns. So even internally, I've seen animals come in through the emergency room who swallowed like hot things that fell out, like a hot potato that actually fell out of an oven once, and a dog grabbed it and swallowed it and just burned the inside of their esophagus. And at that point, like, there are drugs that will help soothe that, but there are no drugs I know of that you could put inside of the body to really help heal that. And there are a handful of herbals offhand that I could think of that really could help with that, like calendula, slippery elm, St. Johnswort, comfrey, even mint. So I think that there is a huge need for people to learn more and go back to nature and learn about these things. It's not hard, it's just not something that we've been taught. So there are a lot of resources out there, and using herbs, I feel like, could be a really, really good thing. Again, you need to check the quality of your herbs. That's usually why I recommend certain companies like Mountain Rose Herbs, Frontier Herbs, Star West Botanical. Those are good ones. There are some shops on Etsy also where I see some herbalists handcrafting herbs, and they sell them on there. And they are good because you can ask them questions like, did you make your St. Johnswort from fresh flowering plants? And I've actually looked for things like that and asked for motherwort, which is mint. And I've reached out to a few herbalists on Etsy to ask them how they make their herbs. And they are very honest about it, and they let me know how they do it and when their next batches are going to be made. So that is a good place to look for things too. and growing your own. You know, of course, something like St. Johnswort, you can grow your own. It's a fairly easy seed to start. Um, I'm not good with seeds, but if you're a good gardener, you can start that on your own and then have a plant on your own that you can harvest and make your own herbals for your pets, and then you have them. So it's an inexpensive way to, you know, buy a bottle of oil, and then you're growing your own plants, and it costs you less than $10, and you have a huge supply for you and your pet. So I think that we're going to wrap up. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Sometimes the quality of these videos, actually, I'm going to pause for a second since there's an alarm going off. Okay, so we're back. So we're going to, I will schedule the next chat. Send me your questions, and I hope this all helps. Let me know if you have any questions about this, and I will see you soon. Bye.